Thank you. Senator, for what purpose is the Senator from Eastern Fairfax, Senator Surovell, rise?
Sir, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Senator, it's the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I was hoping that we might get through this session without hearing about the Buachi case, because that case has absolutely nothing to do with any reason we're here. There's not a single bill that we voted on that I'm aware of in the last 5 years, or a single bill that's pending in either chamber that has anything to do with what happened in that situation. The man was given a cash bond, and he did something in violation of the cash bond. There's no cash bond proposals out there, and I'm not aware of any amendments that have been made to cash bond in the last 5 years. So what he has to do with what we're doing in this special session, I don't understand, but it's an unfortunate distraction. I would also just point out that since that happened, I've had some judges that have reached out to me, and they have suggested that the existence of a cash bond system makes scenarios like that more likely, because lots of times judges feel more comfortable releasing people that are dangerous because they can give them a cash bond instead of putting them on intensive pretrial monitoring or leaving them locked up. And so I would just suggest that if you want to have a debate about that policy, we can have that debate, but it's not, I don't think it's quite as intuitive or simple as others might think. I'm not going to get into the parole board. I think you've heard enough from the junior senator from Richmond and the senator from Western Fairfax about that. Mr. Schooley, Patrick Schooley, that was a crime that was committed in 1979 when I was 8 years old. Schooley served 41 years in prison for a crime that was committed when he was a juvenile. The United States Supreme Court in 2012 held that we are not allowed to hold juveniles their entire life. They have to have a reasonable opportunity to parole. In 2016, they held that was retroactive to people that are already incarcerated. So sure, we could leave him locked up forever. And you know what? We'd be violating his constitutional rights. We can't do that. These people have to be released at some point when they commit crimes as juveniles. It's required by our law, by our Constitution, by our United States Supreme Court. Now, y'all may not like that, but trying to say that us following the Constitution is in some way inappropriate or illegal or immoral is nonsense, because it's the law. So we can try and connect the dots to these things that have nothing to do with why we're here. But it's a big diversion. I heard a moment ago a reference to Mark Warner filing the parole board. Governor Warner fired the parole board because the parole board wouldn't parole anybody. They were a bunch of Gilmore holdovers, and they wouldn't parole anyone. That's why the board got fired. It wasn't because they were releasing too many people or anything that the senator from Rockingham insinuated has anything to do with what this board's about. And I want to talk about the theme of this session. Yesterday, the Senate Judiciary Committee referred to Finance, a very significant criminal justice reform bill, or actually a policing reform bill. Much of the stuff, probably, depending on how you count, but some of the major reforms that were contained in that legislation were requested by law enforcement. Requested by law enforcement because they want to raise the standards in this state, because they want to be able to root out bad apples, because they want to be able to do something about police officers that they can't get rid of. We've had systems in this Commonwealth that have been in place for a long time that prevent bad apples from being thrown out. All they do is hop from department, 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 department. And trying to suggest that a bill that is going to improve the quality of policing, trying to professionalize our police, trying to get all these agencies to become accredited so they will live by the standards that professional police departments live by, is not in some way anti-victim or anti-law and order, or in some way going to put anybody in danger. It's going to make everybody safer. That's what all this is about. And the only people that are talking about defunding the police are people in the minority party. We're not talking about that. That's not our agenda. Now, you can keep beating that horse, but that's not what this is about. And in terms of notice, our caucus put out a press release describing exactly what our proposal was from end to end on June the 26th. That's now been pending for nearly 2 months. We've had, I think, 3 public hearings. The House of Delegates has had 3 or 4 public hearings. The bills have been put out there for shareholders. We put our police reform legislation out, I think, 2 weeks ago. Maybe it was August the 6th. No, I'm sorry. We put the legislation out a week ago. We announced we had a further announcement about it on August the 6th. We put the actual legislation out a week ago. We've been sharing the drafts with the minority in the last 2 weeks as we've been refining it. We've been sharing it with stakeholders. The public knew this session has been coming now for probably 3 weeks. Colorado, George Floyd was murdered on May 25th. Colorado acted on June the 13th with a comprehensive Police Reform Act. The governor of Arkansas acted on June the 9th. The governor of California acted on June the 9th. Connecticut acted on June 15th. Iowa adopted comprehensive legislation June 12. Minnesota on June 21. New Jersey on June the 5th. And there are dozens of cities that have enacted reforms. We're late to this party, folks. And anybody that says they're surprised or that there's some shock that we're doing this hasn't been paying attention. And this is the last thing I would say before we continue to dive into this for the next week or 2 or 3 or whatever, is as we could, I'm sure we're going to continue to hear about horrible scenarios or people that have done bad things. And I just want the body to remember that we've been down this path before. When I was in high school, we went down this path. We went down this path back in the 1980s and probably many times before I was paying a lot of attention. I just want everybody to remember that when Lee Atwater was on his deathbed, when Lee Atwater was dying, there's one thing he did. He called up Michael Dukakis and he apologized. So just think real careful before we go and get out there and try and turn these criminal cases, all these random criminal cases, into something about what we're here for today. It isn't why we're here. We're here to improve law enforcement, to improve public safety, and to make Virginia a better place.